lot of people mention, that LeBron with, his PR team, his appearances in media, etc. He's very, very much, I guess calculated would be the way to put it. I mean, he's also, of course, master tactician on the basketball court. But do you think that comes specifically from those early lessons learned and those early controversies being right away in that national spotlight? I mean, LeBron is still, of course, very active on social media and things like that. But I do think that there is still that level of insulation. And I think that's healthy too, for the record.
He needs to have insulation because, I mean, you can use all the adjectives and verbs you want about it being calculated, careful, and designed. Of course, it's all those things. It should be all those things. This is a guy who's been selling out arenas, literally selling out arenas since he was 16 years old. He is the he's sports's version of a rock star. I mean, he is a great entertainer. And so find me a great entertainer, anyone in show business, Tom Cruise, Bono, Lady Gaga, name it, Jay-Z. Of course, they're very concerned and careful about protecting their image and their privacy and all that. And they should be. And so LeBron has got to a point, and he's been there for a long time now. There's a certain sophistication around his communications in his media. He has hired really smart people to help him and to guide that process. But along the way, LeBron's been doing this long enough, and there's an authenticity to what he does that it's great. Like when he's on Twitter, it's him. It's not somebody else. It's him. And I think that's one of the reasons that his social media is so powerful and effective, is because it is authentically him.
Do you have a sense, with everything that you've looked at? I mean, there's so much that LeBron has accomplished in his career. Justin mentioned it earlier that he stands among the greats in any sport. Do you get kind of a sense of what LeBron would like his overall legacy to be, as we approach the last couple years of his career, in what already, as we mentioned, is a 20-year career?
Well, I just think all you have to do is look at his, I mean, you can look at what he said over the course of his career, but maybe more importantly than what he said is look at what he has done. And I think, and this is an example of action speaking louder than words. When he was in high school, I love this anecdote, right? Jay Brophy, his high school football coach, talked about how amazing it was to have a kid on his high school football team who could talk about Walter Payton with great knowledge. Walter
Mm.
Payton was retired before LeBron was old enough to know anything about Walter Payton. But LeBron knew, like, he knew actual NFL history, not just the players that were playing when he was watching, but he knew the greats. And why is that? Because he actually cared about the history of football, and he would watch ESPN classics. Well, basketball is like to another level. And I think one of the things that so many of the veteran coaches and players appreciated about LeBron when he entered the NBA was his institutional knowledge of the game and the history of the game. I mean, his first NBA coach, Paul Silas, one of the things he admired and loved about LeBron was LeBron knew who the pioneers of the NBA were. He respected the Oscar Robertsons, the Bill Russells. He knew not only their names, but what they did. And there was a certain reverence about sort of the forefathers. And I think, yes, LeBron saw himself early as someone who he was going to get in that lane that those guys were in and be one of those greats. But when he came into the league, he had a deep sort of reverence and appreciation for who those guys were. That's not common among young stars. And so I think in terms of legacy, LeBron saw himself when he came into the league as someone, he wanted to match that greatness and get there. And, frankly, we've all seen him do that.
So I want to ask you, Jeff, about, I guess, on that legacy point, how fans view him. Because Matt and I grew up with Jordan and we have a huge reverence for him, but there wasn't social media back then. So his access was different. We weren't exposed to his flaws compared to LeBron with the youth now exposed to that. But it's so much different access because, like you were saying, with social media, it's him. You get to know him on TikTok, Instagram, etc. So when his legacy's all said and done, what is the reference for LeBron going to be like? Is it going to be similar to Jordan, or is it going to be quite different in terms of just the younger fans of this era, really considering LeBron to go and just watching Jordan on YouTube? Just
Right.
what is kind of their, I guess, frame of reference compared to Matt and I? We can't really relate to that. We're older. So just like how, like, what is that kind of relationship like in terms of actually, the youth actually watching the NBA now, holding
Right.
LeBron to this GOAT standard?
Right. It's a great question. And it's actually, to some degree, this is one of the beauties of sports, right? It's why guys like us love sports so much,
Yeah.
is because these are great debates, right? And it's not like debating politics. This is a little more fun, and you can actually have great arguments about it. But I think there's always going to be legitimate debate about these generational players, Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain, right? Then comes Kareem. Then comes Magic and Larry. Then comes Michael. Then Kobe. Then LeBron. It's a wonderful spectrum, and in some cases there's a little bit of overlap. Like
Yeah.
Kobe and Michael actually played against each other, and Kobe and LeBron played against each other, but LeBron and Michael didn't. And so there is no way to actually say what would they have done head to head, because they didn't get to do that, just as Michael really didn't get to go head to head, certainly with guys like Chamberlain and Russell. And so I think it's dangerous for anybody other than those guys that we just mentioned to start talking about who's the greatest of all time. I mean, I think the safe place to be is look at what they have said. Like when Michael was asked in his prime about being the greatest of all time, he said it was he didn't want to be called that, and he didn't want to be compared to Russell because of how different the game was from when Russell played and when Michael played. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, like from Michael. And I think the danger from guys like us is saying, well, I saw Michael. It doesn't matter whether you saw Michael or LeBron. I've watched both those guys play. That doesn't really qualify me to say which one's the greatest of all time. But here's a different thing about legacy, because that's what you're asking. And I think LeBron's legacy, I feel much more comfortable like putting a stake in the ground and saying LeBron's legacy is going to be very different than Michael's. It's a much broader footprint. LeBron was fearless and bold about venturing into land that Michael wouldn't step in when he was a player. And I think it took LeBron a little while to get there. The first half of his career, he steered very clear of politics and things that were controversial. And to his credit, he focused strictly on basketball. And when he was an Olympian, he took a lot of criticism for that because he wouldn't criticize China. And that was the first time that he was exposed to political controversy, and he saw himself as a bit of a pinball in that thing. And he had people like Coach Krzyzewski, his Olympic coach, saying, why should he weigh in on something like that? He shouldn't. But eventually, LeBron gets more comfortable. And a lot of that has to do with the timing of Barack Obama deciding to run for president, Jay-Z getting behind Barack Obama's candidacy, encouraging LeBron to come along and get involved in some campaigning. And little by little, LeBron starts to inch his way into this other forum. And around the same time, he starts stepping into the fashion world. And he starts doing it at a time when it was certainly not politically correct for an athlete of his stature to start doing some of the things and wearing some of the things that LeBron was wearing. And that's what I mean about fearlessness and being unafraid to go into some deep water that he'd never swam in before. And this is where LeBron's legacy starts to get really wide. And I think that that's the thing is by the time you get to the Trump administration, LeBron is a very fully formed man in terms of being much more than a basketball player or an athlete. His impact on society and on the world is just different than Michael Jordan's ever was. Michael was an incredible entertainer. You'd be hard pressed to point to any athlete in the last 50 years who you could say was a better entertainer than Michael Jordan. Who would that be? I mean, he's right there with Muhammad Ali in terms of like, and Tiger Woods as the greatest entertainer ever from sports. But that's where it stops, right? Michael was a cultural phenomenon in that area. LeBron's footprint is so much bigger that when it's all said and done, you have to look at this man built a school. He didn't just give money, he built a school in his home city that feeds, clothes, and educates children. It's like, okay, that's a full stop right there. Like, who else has done that in sports? And so, and it just goes on with him. And that's why I think when you talk about his legacy, LeBron is already a mogul in Hollywood, and he's still a player. When Jim Brown went to Hollywood, he left football to go to Hollywood. LeBron's been in Hollywood for like 13 years. So it's hard to wrap your mind around the legacy of LeBron James. It's way bigger than basketball.
Jeff, with the extensive research that you've done for the past three books that you mentioned, which, as you also mentioned, focus around some of the athletes that are considered GOATs, are there similarities that you see between those three that you did that extensive research on? So like Tiger Woods, Tom Brady, and LeBron James, namely.
I mean, the obvious areas of similarity have to do purely with athletics and mastery. You know, you're looking at three master craftsmen, and I don't use that word lightly. When you look at the way Tiger Woods plays golf, the way Tom Brady played quarterback, and the way LeBron James plays basketball, it's a craft. I mean, they're master craftsmen. And along the way, they're also phenomenal athletes. Everybody likes to make jokes about Tom Brady's athleticism. That's a bunch of baloney. I mean, Tom is an amazing athlete. And LeBron and Tiger are phenomenal athletes. But I look at those guys like they're like Picasso. They're like, Einstein in science. There's, in other words, it doesn't matter how many times LeBron won the MVP or Brady won the MVP or how many majors Tiger has won compared to Jack Nicholson. None of that matters. The reality is they're one of a kind in the world, right? That's what they are. And there's no one else like them. And so I don't care how many MVPs Brady and LeBron have won. We all know that there could be a case for LeBron being the MVP every single year that he's in the NBA. And it would be hard to argue with giving it to him any of those years. And you could say the same thing about Brady, except for the year he missed with injury. After 2005, he's like the guy every year. And so I think that's the major similarity is their commitment to excellence, and their drive is it's further than everybody else. What they do with their bodies is different than everybody else. LeBron's body is more like a machine, and that's not just natural. He's not just blessed that way. Yes, he's blessed with a great athletic body. Of course he is. But this man's had to work like a machine to get that body to stay that way. Tom has worked like a machine to have his body do what it did to 45. And for Tiger Woods to come back from the injuries that he has sustained and perform the way he has, there's just no one else in the world of golf. Jack Nicklaus is not in that universe in terms of the physical conditioning of Tiger. But that's probably where most of the similarities stop. I think when you look into their personal lives, there's lots of uniqueness about them. I mean, I guess the commonality that you could point to is I think all three of them are incredibly devoted fathers, and they're deeply involved in their children's lives. That is not necessarily common for star entertainers. I'm not talking about athletes. I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about world-class entertainers.
Mhm.
And so to be a world-class entertainer and to be as deeply involved in the lives of their kids as those three men are, that is unusual. And it's legit with all three of them. Tom, LeBron, Tiger. That's not for show. They're in their kids' lives, deeply invested in it. But the nice thing about it is the three guys are really different in a lot of the things they do in their personalities, right? LeBron is a super funny guy. He could be a professional comedian. He could be an actor. He's got this great charismatic personality. Tom is, this wonderfully sensitive human being. Like he's one of the, sort of purest souls you're ever going to meet. It's just like, wow, like it makes you go like, how did his parents raise him like that? It's like, whoa. And then there's Tiger, who had this super unusual upbringing with his mom and dad, and he was really groomed from the time he was, you know, a foot high to become what he is, and it was the perfect grooming for a sport that is all about solitude and being alone and being on your own, and that is Tiger. LeBron hates to be alone. Tiger is all about being alone. So there's a lot of fascinating differences in their personal lives in that way.
Yeah, let's talk about some more of these acting performances too. You mentioned Chris Tucker there, who I agree was great in this. Um, One thing I wanted to mention, I think, Jason Bateman, his character, and honestly, I'm so on Jason Bateman as an actor. He's been in some stuff that I
Agreed.
like. He's been in some stuff that I don't care for as much or see. Maybe he's just someone I don't really feel like I click with or understand sometimes as an actor. But in this movie, he has a monologue in here, and I won't totally give it away, but he talks about his connection with Nike and also does, I feel, an effective job at kind of highlighting this knowledge that we all have that this is a big corporation that does some shady things. Even at that time, back in the 80s, he's able to effectively touch on that where it doesn't feel like an overt political statement. It doesn't get you out of the plot of the movie. I thought that was done very well. And I kind of saw him as being sort of like a mirror for us, the audience, and able to describe like our relationship too with Nike and other big corporations. I thought that was done very well. And his character was useful in showing the personal side and the consequences of what was going on, and added to what you mentioned earlier, this tension building throughout the movie and making us personally invested in it. So I will say, I mean, great performance by him in this movie as well. Did you want to
Yeah.
touch on him or another actor?
Yeah, I'll touch on him. I thought he was great. I was a little bit worried because, like, I think I like Bateman a little bit more, but I have the same concerns. And I thought when he was first cast, I'm like, I don't know about this casting. And Chris Tucker, too. I felt the same way. And at the first scene, when they are profiling players, I think you could see, like, the Jason Bateman come out the most. But
Oh, yeah.
afterwards,
Good
I
point.
think he really adjusted into his character overall. And I think you really saw a serious performance from Jason Bateman. And I co-signed everything that you said. He was a really pivotal piece to this movie,
Yeah.
as well.
I did not expect that. And that
Yeah,
was a
me
nice
either.
surprise.
Another actor I want to point to is Viola Davis.
Yeah.
She is the anchor. I think just having the wrong actress portrayed in this role would have been very detrimental to this movie. And Viola Davis killed it. She was the anchor. She was the voice of Michael. She provided a lot of context as to what the players should want and their leverage. And her face in that final scene, again, spoilers, just warning you, that final scene is critical because you can see it in her face trying to get what Michael wants. She wasn't sure. It wasn't like, oh, it's locked. Like this guy's going to be. I think she believed in her son, but wasn't sure about his leverage as a brand overall. She was nervous about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she did a good job of, being confident in her son, but also being uneasy about getting what Michael ultimately got in that shoe deal. So I thought she was fantastic in this movie as well.
Yeah, 100% agree. I have great performance throughout. Once she's introduced, gives the script gives her a good opportunity to make a personal connection with like Michael Jordan's family and what this means to him. I mean, she mentions like generations of Jordans and things like this. And she was fantastic. I do question, and this is more along the lines of Ben Affleck's creative liberties because her performance was fantastic. I do question, how much really she was like the focal point of that deal as they portrayed it in the movie. Like on the other side of this is they really didn't give Dad a whole lot to do. But that's more something that I would need to honestly have more research on. And the fact that Jordan co-signed it, I assume it's not he didn't take it as a crazy exaggeration of the importance of her role in his life in this moment in time and beyond.
So you brought that up, Matt. So can we talk about this?
Yeah.
So because you bring up an excellent point, and this is something that I struggled with this movie because, like you, I'm not super familiar with the minutia of the details of this deal being completed between Jordan and Nike. And I feel with other autobiographical movies, um, Bohemian Rhapsody, and then Fighting for Your Family, which I am familiar with because I am a pro wrestling fan. I knew the complete history of that story. So that had Florence Pugh in it. That had Vince Vaughn. I don't know if you're aware of that movie. It came out a few years ago. Of Fighting for Your Family about a aspiring wrestler from the UK and to being a WWE superstar. And the
Mm.
actual facts in the movie are wrong. Like I
Mm.
literally saw
Mhm.
this happen, like with my own two eyes. And from just all these minor things to a lot of big things, but the movie was good. Like I still like the movie a lot. I think it's a great, heartwarming story, but the facts are incorrect.
Mm.
So what is that juxtaposition overall for like a person that knows everything about this deal? And if there's creative liberties taking place, is that a penalty to the movie? Or, like my girlfriend, like you and I, like we're not so much, we didn't know every detail of this deal. But this movie's great. So should the movie
Yeah.
be penalized for not sticking to reality more? We're just other autobiographical movies. It's just like you want to make an entertaining film, but at the same time, it's a war between what is fact and what is fiction.
Yeah, I think it's it's all in the context of the individual projects and how far did they reach? So what you're describing sounds like it was probably more of a reach than this film was in terms of that role. I mean, I don't know that Michael Jordan's mother was like on the phone, telling the agents what to do, telling Nike what to do. I don't know. Maybe. I'm sure she was important in the deal because Michael Jordan was tight with both his parents. Um, so I don't know. For me personally, I don't penalize this movie at all, even if that is an exaggeration on that part, because we do also have the source material of Michael Jordan's Hall of Fame speech. That there's a bit of a clip in the movie on that. So I don't think it's an egregious reach, even if it is a reach. I don't know. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I don't think it should be penalized either. I just feel since I'm not familiar with this story, I don't have that context. So, because I know how I felt watching Fighting for Your Family, and there was this like, this is like not. It was a little bit irritating. I'm like, it's like big things too. I'm like, this is not true. But
Hmm.
yeah, it's a great movie, so it's weird. It's like I don't know. But the overall like ending is true. Like she became a WWE superstar. Like the ending is correct, but just
Yeah.
everything in it, everything they used to promote the movie is just categorically false. And I think you're right with Air that they take a lot of, I believe, just through the movie. At the ending, you saw a lot of just the real life character, the real life this portrayals. Sonny was in the movie. I think there's some screenshots of Sonny and Matt Damon in the same scene together. So I think this movie's probably more accurate, but I guess I'm wondering for, like, I don't know, a sneakerhead and maybe a Jock Slade who's might be familiar with this movie, in terms of like the minutia of this whole deal being happening. I just wonder how he feels, or there's other people close to um, this film overall.
Yeah, for sure. And we'd have to do some research on that, get their
Exactly.
thoughts, or you
Yeah.
guys that are sneakerheads, get at us in the comments and let us know. I think certainly if this movie was labeled like a documentary, then you would want more proof and maybe staying closer to and hopefully very close to in actuality what happened. But because this is a release, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck are in this movie who are recognizable stars along with many others, of course. I think for semi-fiction, semi-nonfiction movie, it felt like it was still grounded in reality to me. Like I didn't really have many movies, even with Viola Davis having these major parts. It wasn't something where I sat there and said like, ah, come on. It wasn't to that level that I was taken out of the movie.
Yeah. No, completely agree. Just a couple of other things, and I want to ask you a question. One, I thought the portrayal of how um, irrelevant basketball shoes were, well, it was really great in this movie, because
Yeah.
even with the other shoe companies, it seemed like, yeah, if basketball stars wearing our shoes, so what? And now, it's funny in the one scene where Jordan is in, I think, the Converse, and like the guy said it himself. He's like, you're gonna be like the fourth guy. Like, we already have Julius Irving, Magic, and Bird. Like, you're number four. But that's still great. And it's just like different how the portrayal is now, where it's like you're an entity. Like, you would never
Yeah.
tell LaMelo Ball, like, you're number five, like you're
Yeah.
LaMelo Ball, like or Damian Lillard or Steph Curry, like whatever, or Victor Wembanyama or Zion Williamson. We never say, well, you're second behind LeBron, like the kid used to.
Yep.
I know you're Zion, like we're selling your shoe, or Kyrie Irving. Like, you would never tell them that. So I just thought it was very interesting how they didn't really care about basketball shoes and like the culture there. And Adidas, just like how cool Adidas was. I thought that was really cool. Like with Chris Tucker, he was saying, "Hey, I got an Adidas sweatsuit. Don't tell anybody. Like, I wear it on
Yeah.
the weekend." Like, just the shoes, those were cool back then in the '80s. Was Run DMC. So I just thought I liked that minutia, and I like and my girlfriend pointed this out, the '80s, like
Yeah.
just the
Yep.
clothing, just the era of the '80s, the Sports Illustrated covers, just the discussion between Matt Damon. We would go to 7-Eleven with that dude that was the clerk there, just
Yeah.
talking basketball and how he's wrong about Michael Jordan, and he's like changed his mind once Michael like got into the league. He's like, oh yeah, I believed in Michael always. It's just like
Yeah.
I just thought that was really excellent overall. I
Yeah.
want to ask you a question. So, where do you put this within sports movies? It doesn't have that much sports in
Mm,
it. Like, other than
that's
like,
true.
some VHS clips, there's not technically sports. There's not like, like Rudy or Hoosiers or Blue Chips or any of those other movies. This is very much like business behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So where do you rank it in terms of your sports movie ranking, if you thought about it?
Oh man, yeah, I haven't thought that much in depth about where I would put this, but a comparable movie that does have a little bit more sports action would be Moneyball.
That's
That
right. Great
that talks
movie.
about like behind the scenes, and yeah, I,
Good
I
point.
love that book. I love
Yeah.
that movie,
Excellent.
um,
Yeah.
and I think this kind of course, this is more of a like sports business, not sports team management side of things. So I'd have to watch Moneyball again to see if I would rank this above or below Moneyball.
Yeah, me
I
too.
think in terms of entertainment value, this movie is a little bit more entertaining. Some of that too is because of the nostalgia and the love for basketball that I have that you mentioned with your last point. Um, which I totally agree with. But this movie would rank high for me. The other thing too is I do think this movie is rewatchable. I do think I will end up purchasing it and watching it again. So
me too.
So I would rank this, pretty high. I don't know if it competes with things that have sports action, like Remember the Titans. Like
That's
for
right.
me, Glory Road is a movie that I love. So maybe below those, but I'd want to watch Moneyball again and see if I put it above or below that. But definitely it's on my list of great sports movies, no doubt.
Yeah, I feel you. When you see like a Rudy or like you're saying a Glory Road, it's just like that's the emotional heartstrings. You can't get that with sports business.
Miracle too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. No, excellent point.
Yeah, for sure. So did you have any other major points you wanted to bring up? Do you want to give overall ratings? What do you want to do next year?
For sure. I guess ratings at a 9 out of 10, I give it like a 9.5. If we have to go on a number scale. I'm trying to think if there's anything negative. I can't really think. It was really entertaining, short and sweet, really compelling, no filler, great acting performances. I was thinking maybe if you have to get super nitpicky, maybe Marlon Wayne's role in this movie. Like he had one scene. So, and I thought he was going to be more of a role in this movie. He wasn't, but I mean, maybe that would have hurt the movie. He was in it more. I mean, that's really reaching for things to really, I guess, criticize this movie about, but I thought it was excellent. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. I gave it 9 out of 10. I just wasn't adding any decimal points. I probably could give it a few more points too. I love this movie. It may not be 100% perfect film. I don't think I would score almost any film 10 out of 10 with how I rate movies. But yeah, I'm with you. I think the flow of things were good. One of my notes was like, that I wanted to see more of the players of that draft class. But when you look at how the movie was constructed and with what I said about appreciating the flow of it, it would have been too much to have more with Charles Barkley or John Stockton or other members of that draft class. So I think they handled things very well, very polished. So yeah, definitely 9 out of 10 for me, which is must see by my rankings. Highly recommend.